live. This is what happens when you're trying to be fancy and have a microphone. Okay, listen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of For Real, For Real. And today we're going to be talking about how Black folks can also be anti-Black. Actually, the original title was going to be like Black people are anti-Black AF too, but you know, we're trying to dud just a little bit. So I want to first say that, like, if you have been watching some of these for a while, you will notice that we've really emphasized the fact that, like, folks need to do the work if we are to be able to transform society, to be able to create a world where all folks can thrive, right? Regardless of race, class, and all of these things. So in thinking about the fact that, like, we all have to do the work, this conversation is really framed in the sense that Black folks do have work to do in the sphere of dismantling white supremacy as well. And so, Lutzi, I'm going to pass it to you because I think that we should, so my hot take, okay, I'm going to take it back one more step. My hot take for today is that respectability and liberalism are anti-Black. And so I'm going to kick it to our wonderful expert, okay, who's going to explain a little bit more about liberalism, because folks use this word, unironically, liberally, to talk about certain cultural norms that are not necessarily egalitarian or transformative or really helpful. So I'm going to kick it to you, Boo.
Yeah, so we're a liberal democracy, meaning like we're, you know, Americans are always talking about rights, equality, things of that nature. Where'd you go, Krystina?
A little technical difficulties, but I'm here. So, okay. So we're going to deal with the doggy. This is what happens when you're a pet mom. I don't know these struggles, but because we're real people living real lives. I know that we talked about, one of the topics that we talked about before was specifically respectability, knowing that and we're also speaking in the United States context. So in the US context, knowing that respectability very much was a tool for survival to operate in society as Black folks in non-white bodies in society. And that is something that we all still have to unpack and are invested in, and it's constantly challenging. And so looping it back to how it ties to liberalism.
Yeah, so it's just an understanding of the United States in a very specific kind of way. So understanding just, you know, just believing in things like, you know, like I said, equality, rights. So you always think about right. And and also thinking about freedom is never the freedom from, though, it's always the freedom to do X, Y, Z and a third. And so liberalism is something that liberalism is something that Republicans and Democrats all agree upon, that the United States should be a liberal democracy and is a liberal democracy. And part of that liberal democracy takes place geopolitically when the United States thinks it's its job to go everywhere and spread democracy, right? So that is a key feature of liberalism, is like, I know best, we know best, and it is our job to save the Afghan women and girls. It is our job to do pa 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 pa. It is our job to bring capitalism nation states. So you'll see where these social do-goodery nonprofits will do these microloans. Like, it just make any sense. Why would you want to bring capitalism, which is so pernicious and so awful, and financial tools like loans? Why would you want to bring that into other nation states and countries who don't have a relationship to finance in that way? Why? Because you believe in liberal democracy, and liberal democracy is something that needs to be, that you proselytize, that you're like the Jehovah's Witness on Saturday, like, hey y'all, I got this liberalism democracy. Have you heard the good news of the United States? We would like to share the good news of the United States with you. Like, no shade to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yo, it really is though.
Y'all know what I mean. Y'all know what I mean. And so I just think it's to really understand anti-Blackness and how it gets interpolated by different groups, especially the group we're going to talk about today. We got to understand liberalism, because these particular kinds of Black people are just, they are very much, their view and understanding of the United States of America is very much rooted in a liberalist understanding of the United States of America, while Krystina and I and others, people who are left and then far left and going on, we have a visionary understanding of the United States, meaning, like, I don't know if this is not the best the United States can do,
right?
Because justice, freedom, liberation, those kind of things have not been made evident. Especially has not been made evident for Black people and for Indigenous people. So there's a lot of us that are like, actually, we can redo this thing. We must rethink this thing. If America is an ideal and it's a myth, let's tell a new myth. Let's tell a new story. And so there's a lot of us who are more interested in a different story of these United States of America, but folks who are really knee deep swimming in liberalist understandings of democracy, that is almost considered treasonous to think about having a too bold of an idea of what the United States of America could be. That's considered treasonous. And that is like cross class, cross ethnicity, cross race, like that group of folks and their understanding of the United States of America is what is keeping us from truly experiencing social justice.
And that is where I think the marriage of respectability and liberalism keeps us in the status quo. So last time we were talking about moderation, like moderates or centrism, and it really, I think that's what keeps us in the center, right? So that we can't actually have transformative change, because respectability says, oh, well, we don't want to alienate or isolate or offend anybody. We want to be able to move through the status quo safely. It is really about safety, right? Where we can earn the humanity, or earn the respect, earn the value of WASPs, right? And it really, like, also just respectability transcends, it is not just Black folks who operate in the realm of respectability, folks who are assimilating into American culture. So as a person who works in the immigration space, really what for decades folks have been taught to do is to assimilate into white supremacy, and know that, like, to be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant is the norm, is the standard, is what is respectable. So anything other than that is not respectable, and therefore you have to earn. We hear this a lot in the immigration space, and also, in our retrospective understanding of the civil rights movement, earning the respect of the other, so that we can then, what we're saying or what our needs are can then be deemed as valid, or worth fighting for, or worth signing on for, or worth giving. And again, that is where the liberalism ties in, of like, it is so that we can earn the right to do, as what was laid out before. And really, so I say that those two concepts and, social norms are actually anti-Black, because it constrains the richness, the complexity, and the diversity of what it is to be Black. And so we can only say that a Denise Huxtable or a well, I'm not gonna say Dr. Huxtable, but you know what I mean. But that is what is desirable, right? Mm-hmm. And so this brings us to our next point, that ultimately, when we talk about how Black folks can be anti-Black, we see folks, particularly boomers and upper middle class folks. I will stop saying middle class folks, because actually what is middle class? We are talking, like when we say middle class, a lot of folks are actually thinking of upper middle class folks, and we need to name that. And so when we think about boomers and upper middle class folks who operate in who operate in society with a certain level of privilege and dexterity and nimbleness, and comfort, like, okay, so in thinking about like comfort, they are, to a certain extent, and Lucy and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, they're playing a role in upholding white supremacy by really being invested in these anti-Black notions of respectability and liberalism.
Yeah, because one can be anti-racist and be upholding racism and anti-Blackness at the same time, because what's happened is, to a liberal understanding of democracy, of rights and freedom and all those kind of things, what it ends up putting people in a position is like, it puts the pathology in the body of the person. So it's no longer the system that is failing people. Is people will both like, yeah, systemic structural racism is a thing, and then at the same time get on their moral high horse and say, but Pookie and them should do X, Y, Z and a third, and totally forget that Pookie and M's behavior is definitely tied to systems and to structures. And so we have to ask ourselves, like, whenever the problem of the nation is being put inside of the bodies of the people who are being harmed and abused and expelled out of the body politic of the nation state, this is how you know you are in total respectability politics zone, and you are being inherently anti-Black. And this is where Black people with upper middle class, rich privilege have got to do their work and understand, like, what does it mean? Because sometimes what I think, child. So I noticed this. I noticed this. So yesterday I watched parts of the Red Table Talk with God. Olivia Jade.
I've only seen Hot Take. I haven't seen it. All I know is Gamma was not having it.
Okay, so I thought it was really interesting. Gam was showing racial solidarity with Black folks and be like, this white woman is gonna be okay. She doesn't need to come to us as 3 Black women to try to redeem herself. And Jada called herself trying to be empathetic, this, that, and the third. But what I saw was a rich Black woman practicing class solidarity. And practicing class solidarity and under the guise of wellness, under the guise of love and light, under the guise of whatever. But it's just like, no, just a respectable rich Black lady who can see, she can see herself like, damn, Will and I could have gotten in trouble like that for Willow, Jaden, this, that, and the third, in a way in which, Gam did not come from rich, didn't come from that kind of that's not her life. And so for her, she's like, actually, I'm with my people, and Jada was doing the class thing. But because Jada is Black, that class solidarity is gonna get seen as she's doing an anti-racist thing. And it's just like, man, she's just protecting other rich people, and other rich people, sometimes they're white, sometimes they're Black, sometimes they're this and sometimes they're that. And this is where we have to do our work, because the Denise Huxtables of the world think anything they do is never anti-Black because they're Black. And this is where we got to be like, actually, nah, fam. Nah. We got to dig deeper. We got to do the hard work.
Mm-hmm. And I want to make a correction because I messed up. Claire Huxtable is who I was talking about.
Okay, Claire. yes.
Denise being the one who actually like kind of bucked those societal norms. So I'm gotta get right on my Cosby references. I'm sorry. Don't hate me, internet. So I think that that part of the spark, and I think we've been building to this conversation over time, but I think part of the spark of what led us here was knowing, so we've been in a year of racial reckoning, part of why our like vlog, podcast, whatever we're gonna call this thing even exists. And it was very clear over the past 5 years, even Black folks' response to the Black Lives Matter movement has evolved over time, just as popular opinion has evolved. And I think part of it is because, you know, I guess the cases that received the most attention, I should say, were kind of chipping away at the respectability will save you, right? So before, I mean, there was still a level of class, and you know, this is like a detached assessment, so like full disclosure right now, like there was a bit of a class analysis in the Trayvon Martin case, because it was like, oh well, they did the thing of moving to the suburbs, and you know, all of this opportunity ahead, and then you're policed as other in your own neighborhood, because like, how dare this Black body be operating in suburbia, right? So that was, I think, for our generation, like the spark of like, well, damn, I can't even be in my neighborhood, like in this point of really seeing how we could easily navigate in those spaces more than like 30 years ago. So like seeing that, and then but folks with the respectability lens being like, well, he shouldn't have been wearing a hoodie. Do you remember that like pervasive narrative of like, well, if only he wasn't wearing a hoodie, right? Looking like a ruffian in the neighborhood, like a vagrant. And it's like I remember there was this massive tension of folks, so I would say boomers being like, but his hoodie though, and millennials being like, it could be me. Like, it's like just really plain or simple, regardless of class, regardless of like skin tone, regardless of education level, blah, 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 et cetera, other identifiers, you could see that identification. And that that like for me was a perfect example of how like boomers broadly, regardless of class, were like still married to respectability. And then over the past 5 years, really seeing that being chipped away, until we get to defund the police.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Apparently, they said we're wilding out, like because we're moving away from liberalism of I want the right to be able to move freely in this society, which everybody is all for. I want to, you know, regardless of my gender expression, regardless of my class, whatever, I should be able to walk around freely in society looking like whatever. I think everybody got there, right? 5 years later, 6 years later, to now being at a point where it's like, actually, we don't want to just expand our rights. We want to actually dismantle, defund, reconstruct, transform what the status quo is. And they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. You lost me. And I'm like, it's not for you. Like, but you know, that's just me. Like,
well, because you know, the boomer cohort of Black people were the recipients. So for 5 seconds, the United States of America was really trying to redress its racism.
Mm-hmm.
And so the civil rights movement happened, laws are passed, things are changed. And laws are passed, things are changed for all sorts of other people, not just Black people.
Exactly.
Like, you have the women's movement running parallel.
Labor.
You have the labor, Vietnam, all like people are coming into their consciousness in a very specific kind of way in the United States, and lots of people are getting redress. And right, that's key. Winning their fights. And so I just think that the boomers of this time of Black folks, it's just like they were recipients and experienced a very particular kind of United States, a United States that was asking itself some hard questions, a United States that was like out here like, okay, we'll let you into these schools, we'll give you these scholarships, you can move into the fancy suburban neighborhood, this, that, and a third.
You can have discrimination.
You can sue for discrimination. You can have the fancy corner office. You too can come to Martha's Vineyard, all these things. And I just think because these Black folks are the recipients of that, and because these are Black folks who were able to go into middle class status if they were not, or they were able to stay in middle class and move up even beyond middle class, they have a very particular somatic understanding of the United States that those of us who are millennials and younger do not have, because the American dream was something that was still available and accessible in a way that is not available and accessible to the rest of us, which is why I think our allegiance to these ideas is not so concretized the way it's concretized for this generation.
And I think that is also where it is a great interweaving of the class and generational issue, right? Because they were actually able to achieve economic mobility. So their class solidarity has shifted. And like for folks that, I mean, to be real, and then for folks that like what's actually a boomer? So there are people who are boomers that you don't realize are boomers. So not every boomer is 80 years old, okay?
Hello, because I just found out today Michelle was a boomer. Like,
right.
Krystina and I was arguing on the phone before
I was like, no, he's a boomer.
She's a boomer.
Firmly. So I mean, and I was like sharing with Lucy, like as a person who is surrounded by boomers, like my mom and my aunt and like my uncle and stuff like that, who they experienced America in a very particular kind of way. And like, and so in the case of, I think the folks that we get tripped up on is like, boomer ends at the end of 1964. That's a lot of y'all's parents. A lot of y'all's parents are swooped into that boomer generation. And so it's not just, oh, your grandma and your grandpa like that have had a certain lived experience. It's also your parents. And I think of the fact that they really, and I mean, and this persists still, which is why we have work to do. They were rewarded by society for being anti-Black. So like, and for not being anti-racist. So like, in the sense of, I can achieve economic mobility and upward mobility and access, and educational attainment by being the first. And like, I'm not trying to rock the boat being the first, because like I made it here and this wasn't even possible. It wasn't even possible for my parents, like, in that sense. So like I'm here, I have to prove that they were right to let me be here. I need to be thankful for the opportunity. I then develop allegiance or I'm indebted to the structures that be for even making this concession, right? Like it is just a very different mentality. And I will say that like I have a lot of conversations with my mom, and I use her as my, like, well, really her and her like siblings as like my barometer for like what the average, well, I use her for a lot of things because she has plenty of intersectionality. But like as a person who, like, my mom moved to the United States at age 6, was a part of that first wave of immigration since our immigration system had gotten rid of quotas and allowing for a whole bunch of folks from Latin America and the Caribbean to move here. And so she was, not only does she have like that immigrant experience of the extra thankfulness and needing to prove yourself and worthiness, there's also the fact that she literally integrated every single school her entire life, from elementary school to middle school to high school to college to grad school, like her being able to go to grad school and get it like paid for, like all of that she was the first Black person and often the only Black person in her classes, and in those spaces. And so for her, like, it wasn't about being respectable in a sense of like, oh, I need to be overly gracious to these folks. It was more survival. It's like, I need to do these things, sound this way, present this way, do like follow the steps to be able to like keep it moving and do the basic functions of moving to society. And yes, that afforded her class privilege, right? And that upward mobility. And then she like was able to achieve the American dream for all intents and purposes, right? And so I think that it's always interesting to hear her critique of my more left positions. And she is a person who identifies as a conservative Democrat, whatever the hell that means. Like, granted, like, I was blown away. This was the first election cycle where she actually identified as conservative. And I was like, how is that possible? Like, you raised me. Like, you were right why I have these views, but okay. I think she was more of like a liberal in the true sense of the word liberal than anything, and focused on rights. But she's like, I'm not really trying to defund. You know what she told me? Okay, so this became a mom tangent, but if you know me, you know that I talk about my mom a lot. So she told me, like with the Biden pick, she's like, not everybody needs to be Black, okay? They can't just take all Black people. I said, I'm like, why? She's probably gonna hate me for saying this on it, but like that's the thing of like, we want just enough representation. Like that's that mentality, and I think that it is an obstacle to progress. That, like, bringing it back to the point of this conversation.
Yeah. God, there's so much to unpack there, but it's just it's the indebtedness. And I also think we should never get away from the fact that respectability is a form of survival. All Black people, from Candace Owens, Kanye West, to Angela Davis, to the political prisoners who are in prison right now, are all trying to figure out how to live in an anti-Black world. And there are several strategies and there are several interventions, and respectability is part of it. And I think a lot of Black people, I think that's the starting line, is respectability. That's where, because you're fed a steady diet of anti-Blackness. You're fed a steady diet that says that you're suspicious, you're criminal, you're not good, your people are not good. Like the first things you learn about yourself, if your parents didn't play an active role in your learning, the first thing you learn about yourself as a Black person is that you were enslaved. In fact, enslaved is the nice politically correct term that we're seeing that in now. School. Yeah, people were saying slaves. Like, that's it. Black people were slaves, right? Now we're using enslaved. And so imagine, as a little person, 3rd grade, 4th grade, you come to that consciousness like, oh, like, as if you had no history before white people discovering you and trafficking you. Like, your history starts with the white man putting his eyes on you and stealing you. And so we start there. We start at respectability. And if we do our work, if we're serious about building and being in solidarity, being in ethical solidarity with other Black people, it forces us to do some investigation, do some interior work. And in doing that interior work, we start to come up against all the different lies that anti-Blackness has told us, and all the ways that we have to adapt to white supremacy. We've had to take anti-Blackness and try to remix it and try to do this thing. And when we come into consciousness and start to think about what liberation is, can we put that down and say, actually, that is not helpful, it's harming me. Even when I'm being rewarded, it's harming me, and I'm gonna put it down anyway. Did you freeze, boo?
Okay, I'm unfrozen. Oh my God, that was close. If I freeze again, you can continue, because
gotcha.
It's still going. It's still going. So,
okay, gotcha.
So I think that one of the moments that is like pretty shocking, and I know that Lucy and I were talking about this beforehand, was like we're in this position where we're dreaming of a new way of being, right? And that actually being radical and that actually scaring people. And that's okay. Like folks can feel how they want to feel, but at the same time, we can't let our like quest for liberation and our dreaming and envisioning possibilities be dictated to people who are invested in the status quo, right? Like over like, and I think that is the tension right now, with folks who are increasingly becoming abolitionists, with folks who are invested in you know, I mean, who want to like defund, and folks who just want to really reshape a lot of our social constructs and how we organize society. And that's going to be a tension that we have to deal with. And you're muted, I think.
Sorry. And you know what's interesting? It is the status quo that is making people left. There is no better organizer than the status quo. There is no better organizer than injustice. So I know I've said this before. The status quo, the police system working the way it's supposed to work and killing Black people the way it's supposed to, the inequality, the fact that people can't do what they want to do because of the mountains of student loan debt that they're living under. Trust me, like the Obamas of the world and everyone, don't worry about our talking points. Worry about the system. It is the system that is waking people up, that's making people say, hold on. Perhaps there's another way, because we've tried the respectable way. We've tried to let me, politely knocking on the table. Hey, can I get an invite to your table? And that hasn't worked. And so I just want, so people who are like rooted in, who are rooted to a very particular definition of the United States, who tend to lean on these anti-Black talking points, like, don't be mad at leftists and progressives and things of that nature. It is the liberalism, it is the ineffectiveness of that project that is making people seek another project. So it's like, be mad at your own talking points. You are creating the left. It's you. Because if your version of America actually worked, we wouldn't be like, actually, nah, fam, we want something different. So like, how come we never get to have that conversation?
Right. So we don't talk about how the drastic increase in income inequality has led people to challenge capitalism. We don't talk about how the fact that millions of us, even in a freaking global pandemic, do not have access to healthcare, and like then want to be concerned about, Medicare for all. Like we want, and it's disingenuous. Like, because we're actually not addressing the root issue, and we're picking apart the proposed solutions. Like, come up with an alternative, I'll wait, and also address the root cause. What is the underlying issue? If you can't do any of those things, then again, it's completely in bad faith, right? Like, it is not an actual debate of valid ideas. And I think that as we experiment and question and try to come up with like solutions, it requires us to actually not just tear down what is being proposed, but innovate and think of, okay, well, this part is something that I do like about this proposal. This is something that I like from this other proposal. And let's continue to imagine and adapt and try to reach some type of consensus. But this whole issue of like actually just completely shitting on another person's attempt at solving this universal challenge affecting millions of people's lives is total BS.
I think between now and whenever, I think so obviously we arrived at this conversation because of Obama. And I just think is what I find really interesting is that the coalition that voted for Obama twice has grown up politically and have become more left, have become left. Why? Because the status quo crushed us and killed us.
Right.
And
it didn't solve anything.
It didn't solve anything. And I think what's going to be really sad as we go into the Biden administration and maybe the Kamala Harris administration afterwards, a lot of people are going to fall out of love with the Obamas. Because a lot of people are going to come to a realization that many of us came to the realization towards his second term, like, ooh, these liberalist ideas, they actually don't work no matter the race and the ethnicity of the person. This liberal democracy in this kind of way don't work. And I think there's gonna be a lot of people are gonna be waking up a little violently and suddenly as they start to see how the murmurings around like just falling out of love with Michelle and Barack, because I just think there's a way in which because they're such a beautiful couple, they were the first Black whatever, people can't quite separate, like we can have a critical critique of them and not traffic in anti-Blackness the way they have critical critiques of us, but they're always swimming in anti-Blackness. And I just think it's going to be rough, because I think a lot of people are going to put their foot in their mouth, and there's going to be a lot of casual racism under the guise of leftist hot takes, but it's really going to be anti-Black. And so it's only a few people who actually have the range to critique the Obamas while not trafficking in anti-Blackness.
And I think I was super conscious of that, because I will admit that like my take was, I wasn't surprised, I wasn't disappointed, I wasn't shocked. I was like the status quo, because like I didn't expect anything differently. And I think that if you are, and this was one of my hot takes, I was like, if your bastion of Black progressivism is Barack and Michelle Obama, then I don't know who lied to you. I don't know where you got that from. You need to disabuse yourself of that notion right now. Because like in 2007, they were not the bastion of Black like progressivism. They weren't for the succeeding 8 years, and they weren't 4 years past that. So I think that I guess his like hot take of critiquing the slogan, the catchy slogan, defund the police, like broke some people's hearts and got people in their feelings. But like folks who actually did and do love and respect the Obamas know that they're centrist. Like if you've read any of his books, if you've seen any of the policies, if you listen to the man actually speak, like in what way there was nothing like radical or transformative besides the fact of being the first. Like I guess that is the radical transformative thing, and thinking that we could move beyond race naively. But there wasn't. So you can't be surprised when upper middle class Black boomers are going to say, this defund thing, what does that even mean? And you're going to turn people off because you're concerned about turning people off, right? That's where your head is. You're concerned about polling numbers for the Democratic Party while people are out here trying to like fight for their life. Like the dissonance and the disconnect. And so I think that like the biggest fear that I have is folks not being able to have a rooted critique without being anti-Black. And also like as Black folks, we can say that like there are many instances where Michelle and Barack have been anti-Black or have perpetuated or have peddled anti-Blackness. And part of me feels like and I see it as a manifestation of like respectability, and you can say class allegiance, that like part of the Black American experience in these United States is internalizing a level of anti-Blackness and spewing that out. Like
yes.
it is a part of navigating in these United States as a Black person, and we all have to do the work to divest from our own internalized white supremacy. But yeah, I think that there's a difference between having a critique about the content and the delivery and all of these things versus, you know, what I see some things on Twitter.
Even like the condescension, oh, that slogan, defund the police. It's just like, sir, that is such a boomer thing to say. Like, sir, that's not a slogan. Like, I just expect someone as brilliant as Barack to be like, don't tell me you've never come across abolitionist ideals. And maybe you haven't, right? Because that's like,
no, I think that's impossible. Like,
right, that's probably what considered what fringe intellectualism. Fringe is, you know, it lives in cultural studies, ethnic studies, women's studies, gender studies, those kind of things. So it's probably not considered like serious enough for his ilk. But to me, it's like, it's just the condescension. And so, y'all, we have a lot of work to do as a country. Work both if you are invested in the political project of the electoral politics, and just like on a social relational kind of a term, like how you gonna be with people in Target, Walmart, wherever you go in the world. And we have to ask ourselves as Black people, we want everybody and their mama to do their work around their anti-Blackness. We too must do our work around our anti-Blackness and really think about, what kind of Black people do we care about? Do we care for? Do we want to show up for? Do we want to hear from? And do we want to push? And whose leadership we want to be under? We have to ask ourselves these serious questions. And what are you going to do when that Black person is irreverent and doesn't perform Blackness and doesn't perform respectability and actually does not care to be respectable? What are y'all going to do? Because those Black people are not going away just because Joe Biden won, y'all. Those demands of those Black people are not going away. And so Black people right now who's watching this, like, what does this mean for us? And what does this mean for us?
And I think that is exactly it, of like, actually there is a shift, and I see this particularly in like Gen Z, and younger millennials, or like folks that are firmly millennials, a rejection of like of respectability in a way that's like actually very inspiring. And I like to say that I'm consistently working on rebuking my own respectability. It is a lot of work. But it is, that's what liberation looks like, right? And if we are saying that we want to achieve liberation, and the thing is, not everybody is trying to achieve liberation. That's the other thing that we have to understand. What are you working towards? And again, that's where you like know your coalition and know your people and understand, are we all working towards the same thing or no? Because if you're not, and again, like we had talked about this offline, like I don't believe that the Obamas are working towards liberation. They're working towards
equality,
expanded rights and equality, not towards liberation. And so I can't use them as a barometer of whether a liberation theology is successful or effective or not.
Yeah, and this is going to be a hard one because people are like, well, what's wrong with equality? Nothing. And even the people who think like, ooh, who like to talk about equity. Okay, equity is good too. It still ain't liberation though. Getting us closer. And I just think in this political times, we have got to do the hard work of asking ourselves, what does the notion of equality even look like in a nation state built on genocide and chattel slavery? Y'all, I'ma always bring us back to that point, because I just think we use words that we hear used a lot, and I don't even think we're thinking about that. What does equality, the things that have to happen to get us to equality?
I mean,
we might as well go full stem. Go ahead.
Yo, when you said that, I was like, oh, so we want to equally have rights to land that's not ours? Like that's like immediately what I was like, oh yeah.
Right.
Like, that's the American dream, is actually we all want that 2.5 acres with 4 children on land that is not ours.
Right. Because the American dream is to becoming, I guess, the nice-ish white colonizer.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones that's not going to call you an N-word to your face,
or call the police on you.
Call the police on you. And it's just like, no, I don't want to be like white men.
That is also not even a good conversation of what does liberation look like. It's like, oh, so that I can operate as your mediocre white man. And they're like memes, and I've been guilty of posting this meme, but like, yo, I want to have the freedom of a mediocre white man in America, but like that's not actual liberation, right?
Come on, somebody. Come on and give them the nuances. Come on and give them the nuance. I might want freedom in that way, but I actually don't want to take up space in that way. I don't want to be a colonizer. I don't want none of that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I want the freedom from premature death, and I want freedom to be the most expensive version of myself inside of my Blackness. That's what I want. That is not centered on whiteness. Like the sun, the moon, and the stars is not set on whiteness over here. And I just think there's a lot of the upper middle class Black people shuffle. They are way too concerned with what white people gonna think, what white people gonna say, this, that, and the third. And it's just like, sorry, grandma, sorry, auntie, we don't care.
And that's what we're gonna
care. The same way they don't care.
They don't care about us respecting them. I mean, if we're being real, right? So if respectability is rooted in the dignity and respect of from others are not concerned about us respecting or treating them with dignity. And I think that is also what is uniquely Black versus POC, is like, actually, like literally you're checking for us. Literally no one.
Yeah, we're checking for us. We're checking for us. Right. We're checking for our freedom. We're checking for our safety. We're checking for our right to care, our right to have rest, our right to be cared for and loved. Yeah,
our right to body autonomy.
Right, sovereignty. Hello. And so, like, no, like, ain't nobody. Yeah, so, and that's a hard pill to swallow for people of a very certain generation. That the white gaze is real, because that generation had to internalize the white gaze. Because literally, if you're one of however many Black people in the space, you are the only Black person in the space. Like, they are looking at you, right? They are looking at you. You are the ambassador. You are the ambassador for all Black people. You do speak for whatever. And you know what? I want to honor, like, that must have been hard. That must have sucked. Like, when the 3 years I lived in Canada, like, I experienced that a lot, being the only Black person in the space, this, that, and the third. But I was so irreverent and didn't give a damn. I know I wasn't a good representative, because I didn't care.
Because you're not supposed to be the representative. That's the thing. And I think that I think this is also a part of the legacy of integration, of like school integration, that like we never really talk about, is like actually the trauma and the long-term effects of being forced to be around people who literally did not see you as human, and like day in and day out, like literally every day.
Here's my spicy hot take. As someone who used to do frontline social work, and after spending 3 years in Vancouver, which is a supremely white city in Canada, I think it's harmful. I also actually think it's child abuse to raise racialized children in predominantly white spaces. Ooh. I don't think people truly understand the psychic violence that causes that racialized child And I just and people need to understand kids need more than money, food, and shelter and good schools to be well-rounded, well-adjusted human beings. So if we have to really think about that. What does it mean? What does it mean to raise Black children, visibly brown children, um, in a world in these little enclaves, these suburban enclaves, where they are surrounded by whiteness, and they're constantly being told they're not enough. Y'all, like, I don't think we talk I don't think we talk enough about that level of psychic violence. And after experiencing and after dating quite a few people who were raised in those kinds of environments, I'm gonna tell you from a social worker standpoint, my personal standpoint, it's very, very few people come out of that unscathed. I don't think
anybody
I don't think
comes
it's
out of that
possible.
unscathed.
I don't think it's possible to come out unscathed, which is very true, but very, very few people come out well adjusted. I think you can be scathed and still be adjusted, right? Because, like, yeah, a lot of us have different kind of traumas, and we're adjusted and we're fine and we're able to love and receive love. But I just can't say it enough. We have to think about that in a racialized world. What does it mean to deny people their ability and their right to see themselves in a very particular kind of context, and to constantly be looking at whiteness, constantly begging for whiteness? And this is how we get the kind of politics that we have in this nation state. It's just like people are afraid to assert their rights from their position. They're constantly trying to leap and jump into the white man's position. That is not your position. That is not your position. It is okay to be Black over here. Again, there is not a monolithic way to be Black. It's okay to be Black over here and be in your position, because I find it hard to believe that Barack and Michelle, who graduated from Princeton and Harvard respectively, ain't got no deep wounds and traumas. How come them deep wounds and traumas ain't coming through in the policy? Ain't coming through in these talking points. But I get it. You have to really swallow. You have to really swallow all of that stuff. And so that thing that allowed you to adapt, that became an adaptive coping mechanism to survive whiteness, has now become maladaptive. And now you're using it against Black people. And it's just like, you need to use it against them white people who put you through that pain and suffering. We didn't put you through. We didn't do
that. And I think that so much of Black American culture is, or a key, I'm not going to say so much, but a key feature of Black American culture is this self-regulation. It's like, like for me, I'm like, to be Black is to police ourselves. And it's exhausting. It is harmful to our families, right? Because that then bleeds over into the judgmental grandma and the, the dynamics that damage interfamilial relationships. And it also it spews into our politics, because again, our environment shapes our politics. They are not separate. And one of the key features of Americans, regardless of race or income, we're aspirational voters. We do not vote like the position that we are at. Okay, we're looking a step above, 10 step above. It like the same thing in terms of our economic habits, our spending habits, and our buying habits. We are not socialized to live within our means. Nope. And it is not a poor Black issue. It is not a, it is every single American has been socialized to believe in credit, to believe in getting, if you can't get it yourself, try to get somebody to get it for you, like getting it in some like other kind of way. Like, listen, Sugar daddies and sugar babes are not, again, there's no one demographic, okay? Like we are so vested in consumer capitalism to be able to have this upper middle class or Real Housewife level lifestyle. Okay, I like what she thinks, but like we like it is not a key feature of Blackness. It is a key feature of Americanness, and I think one of the things that is anti-Black AF is the fact that like these two character traits of American society are transposed onto Blackness, and then we get to be lectured about it, and we get to be talked down to about it, and we get to be shamed about it. Again, not talking about the underlying issue the underlying conditions that have led us to do these things, because most people are not upper middle class, and most people are actually not even middle class, which is why I call middle class BS, because if you like to explain to me what middle class is, that ain't it. So most people do not make more than $60,000 a year as a family of 4. That's not middle class. 4 people surviving on $60,000 a year in any major city or in a rural, don't even get me on started on exurban and suburban areas and rural areas. So
girl, you need $75,000 by yourself to survive in South Florida.
Exactly. So everybody want to claim middle class. That does not exist. Okay. So
middle income. I really like that phrase. I use middle income. It's like, okay, you making a little bit of change, but if that consultancy dries up, that job lets you go boo.
I mean, I personally
you sliding down
because we are all what workers. Unless you have some passive income that is not contingent upon your labor. That if you had a physical ailment,
come on with the class analysis. Come on with the class.
If you have an ailment that prevented you from going to work for more than 6 months, would you be able to feed yourself? Because 6 months, a 6-month savings is aspirational. Most people do not even have that. But like, so if we were to do that, a whole bunch of y'all, and COVID made this very clear, whether you are an attorney or you are a dishwasher, you definitely, like, all y'all are workers.
Class solidarity. You better get you a label analysis to understand you are a worker. You better align yourself with other what workers.
Thank you. That's why, like, I mean, I do get some pushback from like the labor fam, but I'm like, listen, if folks like don't have a paycheck, like hit that 6 months of savings, and literally like don't have any form of passive income and don't own anything, you are a working class. You are a worker and you are working class.
People will be SOL in like 2 weeks to a month, and if they don't get a paycheck.
Person is paycheck to paycheck. Not even.
Come on now.
Not even the next paycheck. Oh, this paycheck is done. All bills paid. I have nothing, and you're living off of a credit card. Like, that is the reality. If you even have a credit card, if you even have the credit score to have one. So, like, that is the average reality of the average American, again, crossing up across race and gender. Like, so let's stop.
But you know what though? Okay, we're at our hour. But you know what though? Ain't nobody talking to white people, working class, low income white people like that. Ain't nobody talking to them like that. Everybody talking to us like that though. Like
we are talking to each other like that.
All of our Black people who've made it, all of a sudden want to blame us for things. And I just think it's really interesting, which is why I think it's really interesting. The GOP doesn't talk to its people like this. And I'm going to just leave it at that. The GOP doesn't talk, because the GOP understand that it needs its people. And how can you have billionaires in a party with people who used to be coal miners, and those people think they have something in common with the billionaires? Why? Because them people ain't talking to them people like they wild.
About not having a passport, or about buying sneakers, or sorry, the PS5. That's not a talking point.
Child, my oldest nephew asked me for a PS5. Let me tell you something. Auntie Lucy would get it for him, but I can't find it nowhere. Like, whatever. Like, one life to live, YOLO. Like, I mean, whatever, child. And guess what? I'ma still have this class analysis. I'ma still be about that abolitionist life. And I'ma spread some Black joy to the little Black children in my life if Auntie
As you
Lucy
can.
can afford it. And we just gonna leave it at that. Like, we could do all things, y'all. These intersections have intersections. We can do all things.
All the things.
Hello.
It's the nuance. We are complex people who live complex lives.
Yeah, like, yeah. And Pookie